this video I'm going to show you how you can use granny stitch to create your own blankets and cushions. Hello, my name's Karen Stangram and welcome to Conquer Crochet, the channel for tips, tricks and techniques for conquering your crochet. Everything I talk about in today's video will be linked in the descriptions below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss a single stitch. So if you're keen to get going with this video, give me a thumbs up and let's do this. So today I'm going to show you how to make the granny stripe. So if you've ever made a granny square, you'll be aware of the clusters of 3 that appear in granny squares. If you've never made a granny square before, it really doesn't matter. You don't need that previous experience. So I'm going to show you the demonstration today just using one colour, just so you get an idea of how the rows work. You can change every other row, you can change every couple of rows. There really is no definite way to actually change colours, and like I say, you could make it all in one colour if you wanted to. So I changed every row on this one just because I quite like the way the stripe works, but as I said, I'm going to do the tutorial today in one colour, and then when we get to the final row I'll show you how you can change colour if and when you want to. So for the sample that I have here, I used 3 different colours, and for those of you who are interested in which colours I've used, this is the Stylecraft Aran, and this is the colourway Lavender, Fondant and Sage. The Lavender, Fondant and Sage. So you're going to need your yarn. As I said, today we're just going to use one colour, so I'm just going to put those 2 aside for now. You're also going to need your hook. Because I'm using an Aran weight, I'm using a 5mm hook. That's the one suggested on the yarn label. I'm going to have my scissors to cut off my ends, and I'm going to have my needle for sewing in my ends. So I'm going to start off with a slip knot. You can make this whichever way you prefer. And we need to make a foundation row of chains. Now you need to make your chains in multiples of 3. So for this tutorial I'm just going to do a multiple of 3 adding up to 24. You can make yours as long as you want. So we yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. So that's 12. So I'm going to make 24, so I'm going to make another 12. So pause the video now until you have your piece of foundation chain as long as you want it, depending on what you're wanting to make. Like I say, if you're just wanting to make a sample to practice the stitch, doing a 24 will give you a nice little practice piece to work on. So pause the video now. So I have my foundation row 24. Don't worry if it gets a little bit bent and crooked, that will straighten out later on. So we've done our foundation row in multiples of 3. We're now going to chain 2 more chains, so 1, 2. These are our turning chains, and they're going to give us the height for our piece of work. So our first row is very simple. We're just going to double crochet, that's UK terminology, that's single crochet in US terminology. So we're going to double crochet all the way along that foundation chain just to give us a nice base to work with. So we're going to start off by double crocheting into the 3rd chain from the hook. So we don't count the one on the hook, we go 1, 2, 3. We insert our hook into that 3rd one, yarn over, pull through. You should have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the 2 on your hook. Into the next chain, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops. Insert, yarn over, pull through the 2 on your hook. And we're just going to double crochet all the way to the end of our foundation chain. So again, pause the video now until you get to the end of your foundation chain, and I will meet you back there. So I'm coming up to the end of my foundation row double crochets, so just got 2 more stitches to double crochet into. There we have it, and you'll see your foundation chain, if it's curling, it's probably starting to straighten off a little bit now. Okay, so to do the next row we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. This chain counts as a treble all the way through. So we're going to turn our work, and at the start of row 1, so we're not going to really call this one our double crochets row 1, that's just a sort of foundation row. So at the start of round 1 we're going to make one treble crochet into that chain space there at the bottom of the stitch. So this is counting as a treble. We're going into this space here right at the base of that stitch. So yarn over, insert into the gap, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So it looks like we have 2 trebles at the start of that row. And this is where the granny kicks in. So we're going to skip 2 stitches, and in the 3rd stitch we're going to make a treble. And then we're going to make another treble in the same stitch, and we're going to make a 3rd treble in the same stitch. So we have our 2 trebles to start with, we skip 2 stitches, then we do our cluster of 3 trebles in the next stitch. Skip 2 stitches, in the next stitch we're going to do 3 trebles. Skip 2 stitches, in the next stitch we're going to do 3 trebles. So skip, skip, crochet. And we're going to carry this pattern along all the way down our row. So it's a pattern of 3 trebles, skip 2 stitches, 3 trebles. So pause the video now and come back to me when you get to the end of your row, just before the end, and I'll show you how we start the next row. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end of this row now. I should have 3 stitches, 1, 2, and the one at the top of this chain space here. So we're going to skip these 2 and we're going to crochet into the top of that 3 chain. Now we started the row off with 2 trebles. We're going to finish the row off with 2 trebles. So into the top of that chain space, so skip, skip, and into this stitch here, we're going to make 2 trebles. So that's 1, and in the same space the second treble. So there we finished our first row. So then we start the second row, chaining 3, which counts as a treble, and we turn our work. Now in this row we had 2 trebles. The next row starts off with 1 treble. So we don't crochet into the base of this treble, we're going to work into this gap here. And we're going to do our 3 treble cluster into the gap. So 1, 2, and 3. Now we don't chain any spaces in between, we just travel straight over. The yarn over, insert, pull the yarn through, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. So making another 3 cluster in that next space. Working over to the next space, 3 clusters again. And we carry this pattern on, crocheting into those spaces with our 3 clusters all the way along the row until we get to just before the end. So when you get to your last 3 trebles in that last space, restart the video and I can show you how we start the next row. So pause the video now and complete your row with your 3 treble clusters. Okay, so I filled in the last gap here, and we started this row with a single treble, so we must finish the row with a single treble. So in the previous row we started with 2, we finished with 2. This row we start with 1, we finish with 1. And we're going to do that single treble into the top of this 3 chain from the previous round. So 1, 2, 3, treble, insert the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's finished that round there. Then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn our work. So in the first granny row we had 2 trebles, the second 1 treble. We go back to 2 trebles for this one, and the main reason for that is there is a bigger gap between here where I'd be doing my trebles. If I'll just show you how it would look if you did it wrong. It wouldn't fall properly if you just went straight over. You'd need a little bit more give in the stitch, whereas this one here was going immediately into a space, whereas we've got 3 stitches to get over before we go into the space on this one. So we're going to do a treble in the base of the 3 chains. So in this gap here we're going to make our treble, then we can start the grannies doing our 3 treble clusters into those spaces. So continue going along with your 3 treble clusters into each of the spaces until you get to the end of this row. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end of my row. So I started with 2 trebles at the start of this row, so I must finish with 2 trebles at the end of the row. So I'm going into the top of that 3 chain with my 2 trebles. So that's 1 and then 2. Now there are different ways that you can change colour. You can pull through, instead of pulling through the purple here, you could pull through a new colour and then tie off. This is one of the ways I like to do if I'm making a blanket particularly that I know is going to get sort of sat on and pulled around and things. So I'm going to finish off with that colour and I'm then going to join my next colour. So I'm going to join my next colour by making a slip knot. Again, you can make that in whichever way you prefer. Picking up my worked piece of yarn and going into where this was the last stitch that I made, so I'm going to insert my hook into that last stitch through both parts of the stitch and insert the slip knot back onto my hook. Tighten it up as you need to. I'm going to pull that through and chain 1 and pull that tight. Okay, so the next row starts off with a 3 chain, so we have 1 already. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to turn my work. So we had 2 trebles in the last row, which means we're only going to have 1 treble in the start of this row. And so same before, we don't have so far to go on this row, so we can go straight in to that space. So we're going to do our 3 trebles into that space there. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going over to the next space. 1, 2, 3. And we're just going to carry on all the way down the row with our 3 trebles in the clusters into each of those spaces to make our granny stripe blanket. Now, as I said before, you don't need to worry about how you change colours, when you change colours. any sort of stripe combination. You might want 2 rows of a colour, then 2 rows of another colour. You might want to do 3 rows of a colour, then 1 row of a different colour, and then 3 rows of the first colour, then 1 row of the next colour. All depends what you're making, what yarn you already have, and who you're making it for. So I'm just quickly going down to the end of this row. You can pause the video and rewind at any point. There's nothing new that I'm doing at the moment. I just wanted to show you what the row looks like with the different colours. So I'm coming to the end of that row. I started with 1, so I finish with 1. And I'm just going to finish off there just so you can see how it all looks. Obviously I would be sewing in my ends. So that's how it looks when you change colour. So we started off with our foundation chain in a multiple of 3. Then we added 2 extras for our turning chain. We then did a row of double crochet all the way along. Now one of the things you could do before you finish off is to do a row of double crochet across the top, just to sort of top and tail your piece if you were making a blanket and you wanted it to have a nice top and tail to it, especially if you weren't planning on making an edging stitch to go all the way around. If you wanted to keep these sides as they are, just having a nice row of double crochet there would really just finish it off. So our row of double crochet here, chain 3, treble into the same stitch. So we start that first row with 2 trebles, then we skip 2 stitches, make a 3 cluster, skip 2 stitches, make a 3 all the way along, and we have our 2 trebles at the end to match. Then the next row we chain 3, but we only have 1 treble in that one, and we go straight into our clusters into the spaces that we made in the previous row. When we get to the end, because we have 1 here, we have 1 at the end. Then we chain 3 and we go back to having 2 as we did in the first row, and then going into the chain spaces 2 at the end. Next row is 1 and 1. So the next row is going to have 2 trebles, triple clusters, then 2 trebles at the end, and so on until you get to the end of your piece. I really hope you found today's tutorial useful. If there are any information that you need to find out about this video, have a look in the descriptions below where I post all the links to any freebies and other videos I think you might find useful. Don't forget, if you have enjoyed this video, to give me a thumbs up below. Don't forget also to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you've enjoyed it and you'd like to see more of my tutorial videos. There are 2 other videos on screen to help you on your crochet journey, and I will see you over there. Thank you so much for joining me on this one, and happy hooking!